All right, good evening, nuts and bolts sports fans. My name's Jordan. I'm here with one of our newest members, Henry. He's going to be joining us here on the stream tonight. Raj got sick of me and wanted to take a break for a little bit. Now he's doing some other adult stuff, so I'm in the host seat for once. But I'm here in Pennsylvania. Henry's out in California, so we're switching up a little East and West Coast time. Talking, the return of the NBA. This is episode 15. Lots to talk about as always, so we'll kind of just get right into it. First game we want to talk about, we have Nuggets Jazz. We had a pretty intense game 7 yesterday. Not necessarily the most well played, as evidenced by the final score. Nope. we had a lot of short arm shots, a lot of tired legs, some mental lapses and whatnot. But we did have, nonetheless, an exciting final couple minutes. Came down to the wire there. You had the Donovan Mitchell get stripped. Then Denver, instead of pulling out and just taking free throws and getting fouled, Jamal Murray decides to go on a 4-on-1. Almost they missed the layup with Torrey Craig, and then Mike Conley's three comes down and goes in and out. At the end there could have been an absolutely wild ending and a heartbreaker for Denver. Instead, it's heartbreak for Utah. What did you see in that game, and kind of your thoughts on it?
Well, honestly, like you said, it was a very emotional game, and I feel like these playoffs so far have been very emotional in many senses. Not just with what's going on in the games, but everything else. And it just made, as you can see, Donovan Mitchell in the post-game interview, he was talking about still like police brutality and how he's feeling about being hurt after a game 7. He can barely imagine, feeling, what the victims feel and everything. So it just goes to show that these playoffs mean a lot. I mean, at the same time, like you said, it was a very low-scoring game. And I feel like game 7s get to these players' heads more than we think, because I remember in the 2010 finals and the Lakers versus Celtics in game 7, it was a very low-scoring game too. And these are professional athletes, so it just goes to show that the pressure is on for these players. I mean, they both shot over 30 attempts from the three, but at the same time, they both made barely 8. They only made 8 3-point field goals. So it really goes to show that each team they were trying to show up, but at the same time, they were lacking in many senses. I mean, Donovan Mitchell, he put up 22 points, and that's not his usual productivity that we're used to seeing from him. Jamal Murray put up 17 points, and that's very much far away from what he's usually able to do on the floor. But I think we were able to see players like Rudy Gobert, Nikola Jokic really take over the game. I mean, Nikola Jokic gave him the go-ahead bucket at the end, and that's very expected of him. I feel like he's been lagging in the playoffs just a little bit. He let Jamal Murray really take over, but this game really needed Jokic's presence, and not just that, but at the same time, I feel like both teams, they had a lot to prove, and they wanted to, stray away from that heartbreak that we saw from Donovan Mitchell at the end. But at the same time, I feel like I was confused when the Nuggets went for that 4-on-1 instead of getting fouled, because as you saw, Torrey Craig missed the layup, and they just gave him the blatant opportunity to steal that game away from them. Unfortunately, that's not what happened, and it's just crazy to see already in the first round a team come back 3-1. And it just goes to show. And then we have another game 7 as well. But these game 7s, especially in the bubble, even though there's no fans, I feel like we're just taking away all the emotion and just everything that the players are going through, and it's been really amplified in their games. And it was a crazy game, to put it short.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one thing that gets lost that you brought up. That's a good point, that, Utah did blow a 3-1 lead. And I remember sitting here with Raj about a week and a half ago and thinking that Denver was pretty much dead in the water, because Utah was just rolling on all cylinders. And, definitely a huge thanks to Jamal Murray for bringing them back. He's really the reason that they were there. So even though he didn't have a great game 7, he's the only reason that they were really in that situation to still pull out a win. I know Torrey Craig had said in the postgame about the missed layup that he thought Murray was just going to take it himself. And I thought it was the right move to pass it to him. But it could have been disastrous. That would have been absolute heartbreak for Denver fans. I know Raj and his family are Denver fans, so that could have been really bad.
Yeah, I think that would have been the worst way for Denver to go out, be coming back from 3-1, a game 7, and that they have the ending of the games in their hands, and then they lose to a Mike Conley 3 that, could have easily been avoided. That wasn't the case, but at the same time, I feel like that just goes to show they're going to figure out things of what not to do, moving on into the next round. especially when you're in a 4-1 situation. You have the ball in your hands with less than 10 seconds to go in a tight game. They're probably going to make a better decision, and Jamal Murray is going to be better able to be more efficient during those type of times because Mike Conley had a good shot. It rimmed in and out. It was
Yeah,
I
it
feel
really
like
did.
everybody was just holding their breath at that same time, but aside from that, the players, their efficiency wasn't so good. Denver could have played better, obviously, but I feel like Denver, moving forward, they have the pieces to go far, at least to the Western Conference Finals, at least this year. Michael Porter Jr. has been playing like the player that we've been waiting for him to see from him, ever since he's been drafted. I know he's had his back injuries and everything, but he's been such an essential piece to the Denver Nuggets, especially with Gary Harris being out. He's been able to fill that role. Paul Millsap, Joe Chick, Jamal Murray is. I'm going to tell you this right now. Jamal Murray, I've had faith in him since he got drafted. I there was something about him, like I saw him playing Kentucky, and I knew that this was a side of him that was going to eventually come. And you know what? That's what the playoffs are for. Like it really shows and it separates the players, and it gives them a platform to really jump to that next level. And I feel like Jamal Murray really did that this year. Hopefully, moving forward, he can continue doing that.
Well, that brings up a good point because you're obviously pretty, pro Murray there. That was one of the next things I wanted to get to was we had such a great series, especially individually between Donovan Mitchell and Murray. They were trading 40 and 50-point games almost every night, and you saw obviously the respect between the two of them at the end because they were part of something special. And like we're going to remember, even though it's only a first round series, I feel like we're going to remember that one for a while. So one of the things I was kind of thinking about was like we played the game of like who would you rather have, and it's tough because they both play the same position essentially. They both, as we can see, kind of light it up in bunches. They have a lot of the same skill sets. So I guess my question would be like, who would you pick if you had to between the two of them? It seems like you're leaning Murray, but would like if you had to, say you were like starting a franchise and they're like, hey, you get one of these two guys, are you going with Murray or would you go Mitchell?
Okay, well, that's a really good question because if I'm starting a franchise, I love Jamal Murray, but at the same time, I feel like I will go with Donovan Mitchell because we saw what Donovan Mitchell did his rookie year. He was the one who he was the main piece who eliminated the Oklahoma City Thunder, who had Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony. But at the same time, I was scared that Donovan Mitchell was going to peak his rookie year. We were going to see like what happened to Tyreek Evans, Michael Carter Williams, Blake Griffin in that sense, where they peaked their rookie year. We're able to see everything that they're capable of and see like, okay, there's more potential ahead. And then slowly as their career starts going, like they just start declining, more and more. Not really happened to Blake Griffin that much, but people like Tyreek Evans and Michael Carter Williams, they showed so much their rookie year that we had so many expectations for them that I thought that may happen to Donovan Mitchell after his rookie year, because I don't think anybody really expected for that rookie to take the Utah Jazz to the second round in his first year. So when you're talking about starting a franchise, he was able to just keep accelerating after that year. He didn't let, that get to his head and be like, okay, I eliminated such a good team and everything, so everything else will come with me, He was able to progress his game. He's been able to expand his range too, and with the right pieces, he's found obviously a home in the Utah Jazz. But if I would have to pick a player between Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell has showed, from the jump that he's the man of the team. Like when you think of the Utah Jazz, I think of Donovan Mitchell. But when I think of the Denver Nuggets, I think of Nikola Jokic first, and then Jamal Murray, and then Michael Carter Williams, and then Paul Millsap. But at the same, so it just goes to show Denver Nuggets, they're more well-rounded in the sense of they have multiple players in terms of like they can have that leadership role. But I feel like the sole leader of the Utah Jazz falls underneath Donovan Mitchell. So that's why I would go with Donovan Mitchell instead of Jamal Murray.
Wow, that was a quick turnaround too after all the Murray praise, and then I flipped the question. I appreciate that. That's good, and I probably would agree with you. I think Mitchell's shown us a little bit more at this point, although it certainly seems like Murray has entered that conversation as an elite two guard in the postseason. Definitely a good way to finish that one. We'll get on to, we have another game 7 that's going to be happening in about 2.5 hours. We got Oklahoma City and the Rockets. So that's been a pretty back and forth series. We've seen some blowouts. We've seen some really great games from guys like Chris Paul had a fantastic game 6, really kept them in it, is the reason they got there. We had obviously the issues in game 6 with James Harden pretty much no showing again in the fourth. I think he was 1 for 6 from the field and also deferred to Westbrook late. And Westbrook did kind of what he normally does late in games, a little reckless, had a very bad turnover. This has been an up and down series for Houston. They've looked really good at times and they've looked really bad, which is kind of par for the course given what they've done in the playoffs over the last couple of years. Who are you taking tonight and why? And if you do take Houston to lose, what do you think that means for them moving forward?
Okay, so if the Rockets lose, I don't think Mike D'Antoni is going to stay as head coach of the Houston Rockets, because think about it like this. The Rockets got rid of Chris Paul. They took him to Oklahoma City Thunder. I traded him and everything. He wasn't part of the franchise anymore, for certain reasons. The team didn't work out in those 2 years that he was with the team. And imagine Mike D'Antoni being eliminated in the first round by the player that he got rid of. That's not a good look at all. Especially, when it comes to the front office and everything. So I'll take the Oklahoma City Thunder this game. Honestly, I think Chris Paul is the man. He's the play. I don't even know how to explain him at this point, because not only is he a leader off the court, obviously, with everything that's going on, but everything that he does on the court, he's such an efficient player. And I feel like if we're talking about being cool, calm, and collective and not making dumb decisions down the line, Chris Paul, you're going to want the ball in his hands, because, he had 28 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists in 40 minutes in game 6. But at the same time, James Harden, he had 32 points in that game, but I feel like those 28 points are going to outweigh James Harden's 32 points because of the efficiency and what it was able to translate, when it comes to wins and everything. And the Houston Rockets, I feel like they're just crumbling. You can't really expect much from Russell Westbrook, because he just came back from injury and everything. So you can't fully expect the player to be 100% or to be playing like the Russell Westbrook, that was going on 30 points a game tear, in the middle of the season before the pandemic. That's obviously not a Russell Westbrook we're going to get, very soon. It takes time. But at the same time, the Rockets are playing small ball. And I think it's been proven by having players in the opposing team, having like Steven Adams, Nerlens Noel, really taking advantage of that small ball that they're trying to play against, because they don't have size. They have a lot of guards, don't get me wrong. PJ Tucker, Eric Gordon are playing good, but even they can be wary at times. So that's why the Houston Rockets really rely on James Harden to turn it up every single game. And James Harden is an incredible player. I mean, all the slander he gets for all the free throws he takes, I think that's too much on him. He knows what he's doing. And aside from that, he's a former MVP for a reason and the scoring champ. But at the same time, if we're talking about this game, moving forward to the series, I'm taking the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, that's definitely nothing wrong with that. I know Houston's obviously favored, and I think that's because of just how dominant they've been in some of the wins in this series. Obviously, if they get hot from 3, it could be a really long night, for Oklahoma City. And Oklahoma City doesn't quite have all the shot makers. Chris Paul can obviously get his own. SG has been a little bit, he's a rookie. This is what happens sometimes in the playoffs. They kind of struggle a little bit. But I could definitely see a world where Oklahoma City does pull it out. They obviously have the momentum. If we're talking about, guys who I would trust in between the two teams, if I pick all the guys I would trust, I'm probably going to take Chris Paul first, just because of all the struggles that Harden's had, even though Harden is probably the better overall player. And you're right too with Westbrook. Like this was different. This was back in February and March when he was on a tear. The series is probably already over.
Oh yeah,
but he's clearly trying to work himself back, and that just takes time, especially with the leg injury that he had. But for Oklahoma City, their keys are just going to be try to limit the threes. Don't let Harden and Russ get into the lane and get to the foul line, because that's just going to open up more 3-pointers. And they're going to have to take advantage of those mismatches. Like Steven Adams is going to have to grab 5, 6, 7 offensive rebounds. Same thing with Noel. Like they're going to have to really exploit those matches. And then Chris Paul and SGA and even Schroeder, they have that 3-headed monster all year. So they're really going to have to capitalize on all their matchups. It's going to be, I think, a really close game. I think in the end, I would go slightly Oklahoma City, and that's not like a knock on Houston. I think we've seen this before. Like how many times we've seen this in the last 4, 5, 6 years? Basically, since Harden's been in Houston, they've had this problem of not being able to close.
That's why I feel bad. I feel bad for James Harden. Don't get me wrong, because there's been instances where they have all the momentum in the series in order to move forward, but at the same time, getting eliminated by the Golden State Warriors. Chris Paul gets injured back in 2018. They lose a series in Game 7. Last year, they weren't able to advance, even to the Western Conference Finals. And then this year, getting beat by the player that you traded away. Not only is that a bad look, but I think it's just funny how the universe works, like in this case for the Houston Rockets, it will be the worst way to go out because we all expected this to be a competitive series. But at the same time, the Oklahoma City Thunder are young teams again, aside from Chris Paul, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander,
Right.
Steven Adams is still pretty young. Nerlens Noel, Danilo Gallinari, he's a veteran, but he's not, really up there in age. He's still got a lot to him. But at the same time, Russell Westbrook, veteran, James Harden, veteran, superstars. And then who else? PJ Tucker, Eric Gordon. They have the pieces
A little bit older.
in order. Yeah, they have all the pieces in order to beat the Oklahoma City Thunder. But like I said, Chris Paul, he's a different breed. Like, I really do believe that he's in his 15th year in the league. And especially moving to the second round, I feel like Chris Paul versus LeBron James matchup would be something that, NBA fans have never seen before in the playoffs. And this is something that, we will want to see because they came around the league at the same time. And I feel like Chris Paul this year has something more to prove than any other team, in the playoffs right now. Because before the postseason and before the season even started, the Thunder were voted to have a 0.2 chance to make the playoffs. And now look at them. Now they're putting themselves in the position to go to the second round. So I feel like that speaks a lot of volume, not only to the players, Chris Paul, but also to, the coaching staff and everything, because they've been able to put the right players in the right positions at the right time when it comes to, especially down the stretch. I feel like down the stretch, that's where Chris Paul really shines. Houston Rockets, man, I wish them the best moving forward, and especially what happens after this game. But I feel like, Mike D'Antoni, he's pretty much done after this series if they lose. But obviously, if they're able to have that matchup with the Los Angeles Lakers, Russell Westbrook is going to be able to have that time to continue developing back into the player he is. And then James Harden is going to be playing, James Harden basketball, that we've been able to see. And honestly, when Eric Gordon gets going, I feel like that's when the team is at its best because then you have your whole perimeter players really firing at all cylinders.
And he hasn't been. That's the problem.
And he hasn't been. So that's the thing. So I get the Oklahoma City Thunder, winning this game. Moving forward will not look good for the Houston Rockets. But if the Houston Rockets win, obviously, they're going to have their matchup with the Lakers. And I feel like they're going to have more time to get it together, that this series is going to be a slap in the face, reality that it was not easy for a reason. And that's because, they need to figure some things out. But, on your side, what do you think? What do you think will happen to the Houston Rockets if they don't capitalize on this series?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you already touched on it with your comment about D'Antoni. I mean, if they lose tonight, even if they lose the next round, even though they wouldn't be the favorite, I think D'Antoni is gone. I think Houston's pretty much reached their ceiling with him as their coach. If they lose, tonight, it's hard because they don't have a lot of cap room. They're going to basically have to do what they did next year, which is they're going to have Westbrook. They can't really trade him. You're not trading Harden. And even like guys like Eric Gordon stuff are a little bit pricier. So they don't really have the cap room to pull off anything crazy. They're going to have to just do what they always do, which is bargain hunt for other guys. They definitely would need a center. I think I told this to Raj back when they started doing this, I think in February, March, and they started reeling off some wins. They said, I said this is going to be a little bit of a gimmick, and it was going to work for a while. And because teams aren't, you playing every other night, you're not looking to try and stop. You got this team that plays small ball, 43s a game. Like, we'll play them, we'll do our best, but we're not worried about it. In a 7-game series, you're playing this team, every other day, especially in the bubble. There's no travel, so you're just staying there. You're just studying your film on these guys, so it becomes a little bit easier to figure out. So they need to definitely add some size on their end. Even if it's a 3-point big man, somebody that could space the floor, that would still fit perfectly in their system. But they need that for sure. So there could be some changes. Again, it's tough without having a lot of cap room. The question I did want to ask with it, since we're talking about Chris Paul possibly facing LeBron or the Rockets small ball. If you're the Lakers, and I don't know if you've known this, but I'm a big Laker fan, so I'm watching this series very closely. I've been watching it to see who we might play. If you're the Lakers, who do you want to play more? Like, who would you rather be like? Yeah, we'll play. We'd rather play Oklahoma City. We'd rather play Houston. Like, what would you think would be a better matchup for them?
I feel like the Lakers they're really gonna be like, well, obviously they want to play the Oklahoma City Thunder more because, like I said, they're a younger team. They have less experience than the Houston Rockets. Russell Westbrook has NBA Finals experience. He has a lot of playoff experience. James Harden, he has a lot of playoff experience in himself. But when you see players such as, like I said, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Steven Adams was able to go to the playoffs, get his experience. But, trying to carry a team with so many young players, it's going to fully go and benefit the Los Angeles Lakers because Anthony Davis, he kind of lacks in that playoff experience himself. But, this year, I think it's showed that doesn't matter for him because he's been playing at such an incredible level. And LeBron James, there's not much to say there. I think we all know what he's capable of, especially, heading deeper into the playoffs when it comes to the Western Conference Finals and the NBA Finals. And they have Danny Green, and then Avery Bradley's not there, but Rajon Rondo might come and play from his injury. But that just goes to show the Los Angeles Lakers. And I'm going to tell you right now, I hate the Lakers. I'm a Boston Celtics fan. Like, I'm a Boston. I grew up a diehard Boston Celtics fan, but at the same time, like, I don't discredit the Lakers in terms of what they're capable of this year, especially. Last year, I knew they weren't going to make the playoffs from the beginning. Like, it was no doubt. Like, Lonzo Ball was not ready. Brandon Ingram was not ready. Their core was too young, too inexperienced, and too immature at that point. They all did a lot of growing up. They all developed themselves as a player outside of the Lakers. But the Lakers were able to equip themselves not only with veterans, but with veterans that have these type of playoffs and finals experience. So when it comes to the Lakers and the Thunder, I hate to say it, but I can see the Lakers, moving past them fairly easy. But at the same time, like I said, Chris Paul is a different breed. He's a different man. Like, he's playing the same way that I feel like he played, when he was with the Hornets. That was back in the day, for kids like that are listening that are 13, 14 years old and don't know about that Chris Paul. That Chris Paul was insane. He was a really just a one-man show. And it really goes to show he's back in that Hornet team where, he is the man of the team because, when he was with the Clippers, when he was with the Rockets, he had James Harden, he had Blake Griffin, he had DeAndre Jordan and everything. But he's playing again. He has that mindset of like, it's not necessarily that I'm alone, but I know there's so much more that I have to carry. Think about it like this. In his 15th year also, 15 years in the league, he's still producing at the same level or even at a higher level at this point when people were expecting him to be washed and everything. That's where the best players are made. That's what he heard all the noise and everything, and people just talking about Chris Paul is washed. They needed to get him out of Houston because he was too injury prone and everything. But I think I gained more respect for Chris Paul this year because of everything that he's been able to do for the Thunder, not only as a franchise, but as their leader, because if it wasn't for him, they would not be in the playoffs and they would not. So I give them a fighting chance against the Lakers, but ultimately, I hate to say it, like I said, but I do take the Lakers over them winning in the second round.
Okay, yeah, definitely. And you're talking about Chris Paul hearing everything throughout the summer about how he was probably going to be washed, and would Oklahoma City just trade him right away? I mean, I'll tell you, I was one of the people on that. I thought him getting hurt with Houston again, I thought it was just kind of the sign that it was time. Yeah, and he's really proved everybody wrong. And like you said, he's that type of player. He's the type of guy to feed off of all that, to feed off the comments in the media and social media and whatnot. So kudos to him for doing that. Like you said, he's really has taken SGA and Schroeder under his wing and just really been the key point, even when he's not necessarily leading them in scoring or like doing anything crazy every night. He's just utterly consistent, I think, is what Chris Paul's been throughout his career, and he continues to do so. I definitely think OKC would be a better matchup for the Lakers. Not that they couldn't beat Houston, but Houston would be like an exhausting 6 games where like I feel like they'd be really tired from chasing those guys around for 5, 6 games or however many it would go. Whereas OKC, I think they could win in 5 or 6, and not Chris Paul's going to want to slow it down. You got Steven Adams, a little bit slower. They're not quite as up tempo as a Houston offense would be. So I think LA will still could handle whoever they're going to get, but I think they prefer Oklahoma City, if not for the matchups. You did touch on that you were a big Celtics fan, so we can swing right into that. Currently taking a 2-0 lead over the defending champions Toronto Raptors. And they won yesterday. Pretty close game. We almost had they had the controversial technical foul against Tatum, which was ridiculous with like a minute to go. But they pulled it out 102-99. Tatum did have a great game once again. And Marcus Smart caught fire in the fourth quarter, which I did not see coming at all, since that's not really his specialty. What have you seen from Boston so far that's helped them take a 2-0 lead? And how many games do you think this series is going to go now that they have a pretty good command of it?
Honestly, I feel like their 2-0 lead against the Raptors stems from the beginning of the bubble, because I remember the game they played against Portland. Both Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum had over 30 points. And then that was my noticeable game. I'm like, okay, you know what? Like, all this time off and everything, I think it helped Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, the young core, get things a little bit more together, because once they're all on the same page, I really do believe, in an unbiased standpoint, the Boston Celtics are an unbeatable team. Yes, they're lacking in size, but they just really want to show. Down the stretch, the Raptors, that's where they lack in terms of like where they're going to miss having a Kawhi Leonard. Like Kawhi Leonard was that player for them down the stretch to make the big shots. We saw what he did against the Philadelphia 76ers last year in the playoffs. So they really miss those players, because Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, they're great. Don't get me wrong. They're an incredible backcourt, but at the same time, they kind of miss, and they're kind of lacking that, who is that guy that I can give the ball to, because Pascal Siakam has been really lacking in the playoffs lately. They've been able to get past the Nets, no problem, but they're facing the Boston Celtics. This is no joke of a team, especially because Jason Tatum, like I said, as young as he is very Kobe-esque in a way, in terms of the way he plays, like the way he can pull up from three, from mid-range, the way he attacks the basket. Not only that, but he's such a lengthy player that players such that their perimeters, such as VanVleet and Kyle Lowry, are not going to be able to stop him. But I'll give it to Lowry. He has really good defense, for being only 6 feet tall. Especially, in a league, ran by big men and guards and everything. He would have to work extra hard, to get past those guards that are, 6'5", 6'6", and everything. But I really see the Boston Celtics, maybe a gentleman's sweep. They take the series 4-1, giving the Raptors one game. But Pascal Siakam needs to show up, man. That man, he was supposed to be up next this year in terms of who the Raptors are looking for, being their guy. But after Kawhi Leonard, but in the playoffs, he's been lacking on that, and I'm sorry to say that I've been disappointed in him. I really wanted to give, this is the Pascal Siakam we've been waiting for since last year. The glimpses we saw, the All-Star that we saw this year, and you know what? I hate to say it, but yeah, he's been disappearing in the playoffs, and I feel like that's only benefiting the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, for sure, and that's a good point with Siakam. It's one thing I think I've noticed. Not that we got to give credit to Boston for probably coming up with a good game plan too. They have Tatum and Brown are two very, very good wing defenders, along with Marcus Smart. So they've done their fair share of bothering him and kind of keeping him away from his spots. But I've been a little disappointed in what I've seen from Siakam. Last year at this time, obviously he was playing second fiddle to Kawhi, but he, even in games where Kawhi struggled, he was stepping up and playing well, even especially in the NBA Finals. And he had a really good regular season. I just think that we're kind of seeing him plateau a little bit here. It seems like he's going to the same post up with like a half spin, and it just like bricks every time.
Yeah, and is it me, or do you like you just mentioned right now, his moves kind of became a little too predictable, that the defenses are just able to really read what he's going to do next, and that's where I feel like he needs to take the Blake Griffin route and expand his game. We thought Blake Griffin was pretty much a one-dimensional player. Take it to the rim, he's dunking and everything. And that really stagnated his career. So when he saw that, he was like, okay, this year, he shot more threes than ever before in his career. So I feel like Pascal Siakam, maybe even in the series, but just moving forward in his career, if he's able to do the same thing, then we're going to be like, okay, this is the superstar that we've been waiting for. But I think this series is really exposing that he has a lot of work to do in that regard, for players such as Kemba Walker. I know Kemba Walker has been playing With a little messed up knee. He's been sore here and there. He's had his knee problems and stuff. And honestly, like I said, as a Boston Celtics fan, that worried me a little because we need Kemba Walker very, very badly. But at the same time, he's been playing very, very well, especially because he knows the offense doesn't just run through him. Because I'm telling you right now, when Jaylen Brown, I feel like too many people sleep on that man, because when he gets it going, that team, the perimeter is just they're so young, but they're so talented at the same time that they have so
Right.
much to offer. And Brad Stevens and Nick Nurse, that coaching matchup is incredible. Brad Stevens is an incredible coach, being so young and, being placed in the Boston Celtics, such a huge franchise, and having so much success early on in his career. Nick Nurse, the coach of the year. I got emotional the way they presented it to him. His old coach from high school. I gave it, announced it to him that he's the coach of the year and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
it just goes, it's real testimony to Nick Nurse's growth as a coach, because this was a do or die year for him. And it still is, like, can he show that Kawhi Leonard wasn't the Toronto Raptors, that it runs through a system, it runs through a team that Nick Nurse built? And this year did show that, but he needs to capitalize off that opportunity to show, like, we don't need Kawhi during these times, or he wasn't the only reason why we won a championship. But right now, Brad Stevens and the Boston Celtics and Marcus Smart have the better of them, because as we all saw, we're not used to seeing Marcus Smart, take over games offensively. But, when we saw how crazy he was going from the 3-point line, it was surprising to me. I know he's a defensive stoppage, but
Mm-hmm.
when he gets it going as well, it's just the Boston Celtics are too multidimensional right now for the Toronto Raptors. And I think their biggest problem, what do you think the Raptors' biggest problem is right now? And what do you think they need to fix in order to win game 3, win game 4, hopefully make this series competitive?
Yeah, and I think there's still a chance that like Toronto could push this to 6. A very slim chance for 7, but because I think they're too proud to be be champions and not come out and show up. I thought in game 1, like they didn't hit enough shots. I thought they got a lot of good open looks, and like Van Fleet and some of those guys were just not good at all, and they just missed.
Yeah.
Like I thought that, but in game 2, it was obviously much closer, and it just seemed like Toronto was a little stale down the stretch. They don't have like that one guy, like obviously Marcus Smart did his thing, but like when it comes down to it, like if it's a late game, 1-2 possessions, they're gonna give the ball. Boston give the ball to Tatum, right? Tatum's your go-to. He's your star. He's the guy you count on late to bring it home. And Siakam's supposed to be that guy for Toronto, but he hasn't been, and they don't really have anybody else. And here's like kind of like a dirty little secret that maybe people will be upset at me for. I'm not a Kyle Lowry fan. Have not been for years, because the guy pretty much routinely sucks in the playoffs. Last year was like the one time where he actually played very well alongside Kawhi, and surprise, they won. But for all those years they lost to Cleveland, he was always pretty terrible. And so far, it's only been a round and a half here, but 6 games in the playoffs, he's 14-7 a game, and he's shooting 36% from the floor and 26% from 3. This is kind of what he does. So when your starting point guard isn't doing that, Van Fleet, I think, has just been a little cold. I think he's phenomenal, but he's just been a little cold right now. And then Siakam not playing well. That's when those guys don't have it going. Toronto is not flowing, and Boston's bench has also been able to pretty much counter Toronto's, which is also huge. So even when Kemba and Tatum and those guys have had to sit, like Wanamaker, and Robert Williams and those guys have given Boston some good minutes, which, especially from like Rob Williams, such a young guy, and Wanamaker kind of like an unknown almost a year and a half ago. That's been really huge for them. So I definitely see Boston winning the series. I would say it's going to be between gentleman's sweep or game 6. We'll hit the other Eastern Conference semifinals, because that one we already had game 1 the other day. Miami, the Heat kind of stunning the Bucks here in game 1, 115-104. They were pretty much in control from most of the second half on. They outscored them by like 16 in the second half. Really seemed to slow down and bother Giannis. Didn't really let him get to his spots. Giannis also didn't help himself with some pretty poor free throw shooting. And on the other end, you had Dragic had a great game, but the superstar for them was obviously Jimmy Buckets, a.k.a. Jimmy Butler. He was phenomenal. He had more jump shots than I think I've ever seen him hit. He had, as everyone's saying, he had like the look, which was just like, I'm going to take over this game. And he did. Late, he closed. No, he did. He hit every shot for them. I said going in that Miami benefited from having, with everything that happened last week with a day or two of no games, because of the boycotting and the conversations that were had. The NBA side of it was that Miami still had to wait for Milwaukee to finish up their series against Orlando. So they got a couple extra days down there in the bubble to rest, watch all the film on Giannis and figure it out. And I was very confident actually that Miami was going to steal game one, and they did. And this is going to be a dogfight. Like, this is not a series that, Milwaukee can just go through like they did with the Magic. Miami's very well coached. They have a very good defense. They have, as I told Roger Monday, and I mean this in the nicest way, they have guys that are dogs, and Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. These guys they'll do. When I say dogs, I mean like they'll do the dirty work. They'll die for loose balls. They'll be gritty on both ends of the floor, and then you have some playmakers and Dragic, shooters and Hero and Robinson. So I mean they have a lot of really nice pieces, and they obviously have a very good coach in Spoelstra. We're kind of seeing it again in Milwaukee though, where Bud is refusing to make some adjustments as he did last year and as he's always done as a coach. Like, Giannis only played like 33 minutes in game one, and it's like, this is the playoffs. Like, he can go 40 minutes. He's in shape enough. It's not like he was in foul trouble. Yeah. That's something that's really frustrated me. What do you see for game two here? Because, I mean, if Milwaukee doesn't even this up, there's no like home court thing, but you don't want to go down 2-0. Like that's the biggest thing. What do you see Milwaukee needing to do here to get back in this series?
I think first of all, Giannis needs to just, if he can, play the whole game, because when you take Giannis off the floor, it was crazy to think that the Bucks were, the number one team in the NBA during the regular season. Obviously they had a very well-balanced team outside of Giannis, but I think these playoffs are exposing that, when you take him off the floor, you rely on players such as, Brook Lopez, Chris Middleton. And Chris Middleton, he showed up last game. He had 28 points. But at the same time, the Heat were too much, not even just the Heat, Jimmy Butler played the same way that, I don't think, was it me? Or is this the first time you see him take over a game like this since his Chicago Bull days? Because like you said, every jumper he took, every mid-range shot, every three-point shot, I was like, I have not seen him shoot the ball at this frequency, in so long, because he's not one-dimensional in terms of like, he knows, or he thinks he needs to like take over games in order for their team to win. They have good pieces. I mean, they have Tyler Hero, Goran Dragic, Bam Adebayo. But Jimmy Butler yesterday, when he had 40 points, he's the first Heat player since LeBron James and Dwayne Wade to have 40 points in a playoff game. So it goes to show, we're like, okay, damn, like I kind of forgot, how Jimmy Butler is able to produce, offensively in terms of how many points he can score. But last game showed me, I was like, okay, like he's still playing as if, his Chicago Bull days when Derrick Rose wasn't playing, he just completely took over that team. And he was the reason, their offense was so efficient and everything. He showed that he's still that player, he's still that guy. It's funny because he was quoted by saying, I found this a very funny quote. I don't know if you saw it, but he said that he told his teammates, "Oh, if I'm feeling it, don't expect me to pass me the ball." And I forgot. And then I was like, you know what? If you got that type of confidence in you, especially during a playoff game, then why not? And all his teammates really agreed with him. And I'm really happy to see players such as Goran Dragic finally get the opportunity to, excel in the playoffs, because Goran Dragic has been a player I've been seeing, since his Phoenix Suns days, he's been behind Steve Nash, back in 2010. It's been a long time coming for him. And, obviously you wish those type of players the best, because it's been a long time coming for them to have these type of opportunities to eventually, reach the conference finals and stuff. And Eric Spoelstra has showed he doesn't. I used to think personally, I was like, okay, you know what? It kind of shows like he needs LeBron, he needs Dwayne Wade and stuff, like, because aside from that, the Heat were not very good. But this year really showed, especially, Kendrick Nunn, Andre Iguodala. I think the Heat are more equipped than the Milwaukee Bucks to move to the Eastern Conference Finals. But at the same time, like you said, we don't know what to expect game two. There might be a lot of change-ups. Giannis might play like the MVP that we know that he is. But I want to hear your thoughts on, what do you think the weaknesses are for the Heat? I know we're talking about a lot of their strengths, but just like every other team in the league, each team has their own weaknesses. So I'm interested to hear, what do you think the Miami Heat are lacking in their part, in order to, that's probably going to stop them from winning the series ultimately.
Yeah, if Miami does have a weakness, it's the fact that they're not a great three. Like individually, as I've said a couple times, Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson
Oh yeah,
and even Dragic are very good 3-point shooters. And like I would never leave them open. But outside of that, like you have Butler, who's not normally a
the
good
best.
3-point
Yeah,
shooter. Bam can't stretch the floor. Linux he can get hot, but not really. Iggy can hit him sometimes when they count, but he's also getting older. So like they're very hit and miss. Like throughout, even though they won by 11, they were 12 to 31 from three, which I don't know if they're going to shoot that good of a mark again. That was almost 39%. Like they would need to keep that level of 3-point shooting up if they wanted to really take control and win the series. I do want to highlight your point, though. I did like what you said about the Jimmy Butler quote, and I don't have a problem with it. I'm a huge Jimmy Butler fan. I think he is a super competitive guy who only wants to go out there and win, as evidenced by the fact that he is not even having any family members come in the bubble. He said it's a business trip, which
yeah,
just only bumped him up on my list even more.
yeah.
But I like his comment about it. If he's hot, don't expect him to pass the ball. And like during the regular season, that's probably not like the time and place to say it. This is the playoffs. You need a guy that's going to be like, listen, if I get hot, I'm going to take over. You need that in the playoffs. Name me the last NBA champion to win without a true superstar was probably maybe the '04 Pistons, maybe the 14 Spurs, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't happen that often. You need a superstar, someone who's willing to take the big shots late. And Miami, at least whether Butler's going to continue to make those, we'll see. But at least it's encouraging that he is willing to take them. But we'll see. Like through all that, like he obviously took over in the second half. And Giannis kind of faded. We'll see if that flip-flops in game 2. Like I said, you've both highlighted Jimmy Butler hit more jumpers than I think we've seen. So can Miami expect that to continue? Probably not. So they're going to have to find other guys and other ways to win. And Giannis just had a bad game. Like I'm not going to cut him total slack because he is going to be probably the 2-time MVP. So he should be playing at a high level all the time, but it does happen. The big thing here the big thing that I want to see is you see that with LeBron James, Chris Paul, a lot of these veteran guys that have been around for a while. And we saw it most evidently with LeBron James in game 1 against Portland. They lost. He didn't play well, and everyone gave him crap. And then he came out and he figured it out the next 4 games. So can Giannis take what happened in game 1, take look at the film, see what Miami was doing defensively to disrupt him, and can he come out and make his adjustments in game 2? That's what separates the superstars from like that next level of greatness. Like anybody can be a superstar and score a bunch of points and do stuff during the regular season, but the playoffs, it's about making adjustments because you're seeing the same team over and over again. So can Giannis do that? I think so. I think he's going to look to be a little bit more aggressive. He only took 12 shots. And obviously he's got to hit his free throws. 4 or 12 is unacceptable by any level. He's got to hit at least 60% of his free throws. Otherwise, Miami's going to have no problems fouling him. Like I would send him to the line constantly. But I expect him to play better. Middleton was good most of the game, kind of wilted in the second half. He's going to have to stay consistent shooting the ball. And then it's going to come down to the guards. I mean, they have George Hill's been very good for them all year, but he is a little bit older. Wesley Matthews is a little bit older. Eric Bledsoe didn't play and also famously chokes in the playoffs. So their guards do worry me, and that seems to be one of Miami's strengths as well. They have Dragic, like you said, who can really control the ball. You have Harrell, who you have to worry about. Spoelstra hasn't even really unleashed Kendrick Nunn in the playoffs. He's only played him like a little bit here and there, and he's kind of just biding his time. So he has that like at his disposal too. And then you have Bam, and Bam's kind of a very underrated player. Does a lot of things for Miami. All the dirty work, does everything on defense, and then is great at setting screens and moving the ball on offense. He's not a guy that needs the ball to be effective at that end, which is, I think, a rarity in today's game. So it's going to be interesting. I think it was one of those, kind of like in Rocky, when Rocky comes out against Creed, and Creed kind of thinks he's all that, and next Creed gets he gets knocked and he gets hit in the face, and now it's time to see what the response is going to be in round 2. It's going to be really really interesting to see. And then obviously we have the Lakers and Clippers kind of waiting to obviously the Clippers have theirs now, but we're waiting to see who the Lakers are going to play, and then we'll get those series started as well. I think we are going to pretty much wrap up though. Any last thoughts? Anything you are looking for tonight's game at all? Whether it's from the Thunder game, or let me see who the other game is, the Heat Bucks. So anything that you're looking to see in those 2 games that the fans should be looking at?
Pretty much what you just said right now. I expect Giannis to have, that bounce back performance because he is the MVP of the league. So we know what he's capable of. So I do expect him, to turn it up as the series progresses, because I don't think he wants, eventually to get swept by the Miami Heat. as a first seed in the East. For the Rockets and, for the Thunder game, I can see it, kind of recreating what happened yesterday with the Nuggets and the Jazz. It's going to come down to the wire. Hopefully another crazy finish, because I feel like that's so good, not just for the league, but for NBA fans. We're able to see just how much, these players are putting in, especially when they know their series and their careers are on the line.
Mm-hmm.
I do expect it to be a low scoring game because, like I said before, game sevens do get to these players' heads, and their efficiency do tend to go down. I mean,
Everybody gets tight.
Mm-hmm. And I remember, I don't know if you remember, but the Houston Rockets, when they went 0-28 against the Warriors in that game 7, if that happens again tonight, then they're probably just going to replace the whole team, the whole coaching staff, because at that point it'll be unexpected. But like I said, the NBA playoffs are really an unpredictable place, and that's why this league is so exciting. So we can be completely wrong at the same time. So that's what makes this so funny as well. But I expect a lot of great things to happen tonight, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Yeah, I completely agree. You're right about the unpredictability.
Yeah.
So that's going to do it for our show here on Wednesday. Henry, thanks for coming on. I think we're going to look to have you back Friday, because I think Raj is still out. But we'll definitely look to have you back then and moving forward as well. Everybody out there, don't forget to follow Nuts and Bolts Sports there on all social medias, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Subscribe on YouTube. Check out all of our other live shows as well. And we'll see you guys on Friday.
Cool. Thank you.